Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and it's time to get wealthy. You're going to learn exactly what you need to know and do to finally achieve the level of success that you desire and you deserve. It's Black History Month, and I am the daughter of a sharecropper. And certainly, as Black Americans, we have made great strides both economically and politically. But when it comes to real wealth, Blacks, Hispanics, Native Americans, little has changed in over 50 years. And in fact, the wealth gap continues to widen. I am excited to have a conversation with our guest today because he spent his career managing assets for large institutions and very wealthy families. And he's here to really share with us and give us some perspective on the wealth gap and what we need to do in order to close it. But here are the three things that you may not know about this wealth gap. The first is that Blacks, Hispanics, Latinos, Native Americans earn half of what most white Americans earn, and Blacks have less than 1/10 the wealth of their white counterparts. And finally, and this is really huge, that the wealth gap has literally not changed in over 50 years, according to the Federal Reserve Board. And that's why I'm excited to chat with our guest today, someone who's approaching this wealth gap in a unique way. He is Jim Casselberry, and he's the CEO of Known Holdings. And they manage finances and assets for institutions and wealthy families. But not only that, they have created a platform, an ecosystem to bring resources to Blacks and people of color so that they can scale their business. And I am excited to welcome Jim Casselberry onto Get Wealthy. Welcome to the program, Jim.
Well, thank you, Deborah. Really do appreciate, being here with you and to have this conversation because it's such an important conversation to have. And I think that wealth and wealth creation is probably, even though we've had several examples of African Americans and other people of color being able to be successful, we still aren't seeing the mass level of us being lifted up. We're still struggling in situations that aren't far different than our ancestors who came out of slavery. And the way that we do that and the way that we look to be able to change that is by creating better access to capital, by putting people of color in decision-making positions to be able to make those decisions and to be able to make those allocations that currently aren't being made or haven't been made or have been made or set up in a program that was a subset. All of the minority inclusion programs usually were just set-asides of the whole. So where there was greater wealth being created outside of that, we were put in a position of almost having to be crabs in the barrel for the scraps that we would get on the side.
Well, no, I mean, it is interesting because before we get into the conversation, I really feel like it's important for people to know your own backstory and how you came to take this path toward managing and have managed billions of dollars. So Jim, where did you get your start on this path?
Well, Deborah, I am a child and grandchild of entrepreneurs. My grandfather came up to the Chicago area from Wedowee, Alabama in 1918 after World War I, and worked for a few years with my grandmother as a domestic. And then he started a business in 1922, which was a waste disposal company. That waste disposal company grew to be one of the largest independent in Illinois. And we sold to Waste Management in the mid 70s. I grew up thinking that everybody had a safe in their kitchen because we used to have payroll Thursdays, and one of my jobs was to put the change in the payroll envelope because you didn't write somebody a check who was a weekly worker. But that experience instilled in me with my parents to be able to be entrepreneurial. The other thing is that both my grandfather, my uncles, and my dad, they really wanted my path to be in finance, in banking. So they even dissuaded me from working in the family business, while I think I would much rather have stayed in the business and be known as the porta pot king of North America. But again, it was the connections of growing up in the community that I grew up that gave me the opportunity to be able to get one of my first jobs, which was at First National Bank of Chicago in the trust department. And that was one of my awakenings to where I was seeing familiar family names in the neighborhood that I lived in. They lived in the same size house, but their family had 8-figure wealth, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't that we weren't doing well and we weren't thriving. You know, my parents were very much focused on education. My oldest sister is a physician. She went to Harvard and University of Chicago. My sister, who's also older sister, 5 years older, she went to Smith and London School of Economics and Northwestern. So the expectation of excellence was really just really indoctrinated into me. And so as much as I tried to resist it, I saw seeing the opportunities that had to go beyond just education, because there was something different. Even though we were business owners, even though that we had education, we still weren't in the position to accumulate the same level of wealth. And so throughout my career, being at First Chicago, then I worked at the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, running a portion of their portfolio. And then later I ran my own firm. And then I was a consultant with one of the largest institutional investment consulting firms, and consulting where I advised some of the largest asset holders on the planet and pension funds. And after that, subsequently started to work with investment managers to help them be able to navigate being able to get allocations from asset holders. And when I say asset holder, I'm talking about wealthy families. I'm talking about foundations, endowments, and institutions, those that have some level of a gatekeeper, which are in front of you to be able to determine if you get or don't get selected for particular opportunities. But that's in a small nutshell. I think that's my career and where I am now.
That's your career. What I'm most intrigued about is the fact that even though your family had been quite successful, I mean, certainly if we were to look at within our community, you had hit, you were in a certain socioeconomic, right? That one of the highest socioeconomic realms for African American people. And by the way, I just wonder how far away Wedowee, Alabama was from Pineapple, Alabama, where my mother, right, was born and my grandfather was born. But I say that, Jim, the framework of Get Wealthy and the premise of it is really to dispel a lot of the myths about what it takes to be financially successful, and to double down on the fact that there is a difference between income and wealth. And I think that you've sort of, that is the conversation that we're having. So just for the framework, the first segment is really around mindset. Mm-hmm. And the question I have for you really is, I really believe that the financial success roadmap that Black Americans, people of color, were given is exactly what your family was able to really provide you at a very high level, and that is education and a career and access to a career that paid a very significant living. But if you were to look at that from the standpoint of most African Americans and the fact that we have very little wealth, I want to go to the mindset aspect of this and just, it's great because I can juxtapose this against the sharecropper, right? Living, having to never owning the land, right? And making a living. And that's exactly what we find ourselves with in terms of middle-class America, middle-class Black America, buying into the idea of earning the income, but never learning how to turn that income into wealth. And that's exactly what you saw, right? As you went in your career, the difference between wealth and income. And so the question I have for you to begin with is, what is the mindset shift that Blacks and people of color will have to make in order to understand that difference between income and wealth and close the wealth gap?
Well, Deborah, that's the $64 million question. Just per se, as we see. But the mindset is we have been conditioned to be financially passive, right? We've been conditioned to, if we do start to earn income, if we do save, we're taught to save very conservatively.
Yes.
Right? Or we go on the inverse. When we do get extra disposable dollars, we go spend them on those things that show the visibility of wealth. And even in our businesses, we've developed our businesses which create tremendous cash flow, right? They create a lifestyle. And I always have characterized it as the difference between what you are when you're rich versus wealthy. When you're rich, you have great cash flow. You can do whatever you want. You can pay the American Express bill every month. You can travel. You can do that. But at the end of the day, when you actually look at the bank, you don't have 7, 8 figures, even 9 figures in the bank that then create generational wealth for the rest of your family and who you want to be able to leave it to. And that's what we have to get into a mindset that's a little bit different. We have to get into a mindset where we can be a little bit more creative with the type of investments. And also the thing that we have to get comfortable with is to be able to be, I'll say the term, we have to be prudently aggressive. We have to take some level of risk, because if you don't, you're not going to put yourself in the position to really be able to gain significant wealth.
This is good, because one of the things that I often say is you can't save your way to wealth. And right. When you look at where Blacks, people of color, where those assets are, one of the things we know is that we own so little equity assets, which have outperformed any other type of investments. We find when you look at the numbers, so much of our savings and potential investment capital is in fixed income investments, whether it's bonds, whether it's insurance, whether it's products that really haven't been able to accelerate our wealth. So when we come back in our next segment, which is strategy, I want to talk specifically about, from your purview, what you feel African Americans, people of color, need to do in order to accelerate their financial growth, right? And begin to make some kind of dent in this wealth gap. So don't go anywhere, folks. We'll be right back. All right, we're talking strategy when we come back.
Let's be honest, as successful women, we're crushing it. Maxed out 401k and Roth IRA? Check. Aggressive savings and investments? Check. Yet, the freedom our success was supposed to buy can leave us stuck on the six-figure hamster wheel, watching retirement slip further down the road. There's another way. Get coaching courses and community at wealthyu.com.
Fanbase is pioneering a new era of social media for the creator economy. This next generation social media app with over 600,000 users is raising $17 million, and now is your chance to invest. For details on how to invest, visit startengine.com/fanbase or scan the QR code. Another way we're giving you the freedom to be you without limits.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Deborah Owens, host of Get Wealthy, and we're talking about getting wealthy by closing our wealth gap. And today I'm having a conversation with Jim Casselberry, who is CEO of Known Holdings, a asset manager and registered investment advisor firm. So, Jim, we talked a little bit about, I'm so glad you touched on this point too, about it's not that we don't have cash flow or assets. If you look at how different minorities are characterized, typically it's from that consumer and buying power, but not turning that, income into wealth, if you will. So now I want to talk about strategy and start exactly where you left off. And that is about being prudently aggressive. So describe what you mean by that.
Well, Deborah, there's a couple of things. One, for all our young people that are just starting out in the first job, one of the things that they are given, but a lot of them, because of student loan debt and because of a lot of the other things that are faced, they don't take advantage of it, and it puts them at an immediate disadvantage, is the 401k programs that are available through the jobs. Do that, regardless of, as much as you think you can't afford to do it, you can't afford not to do it, because making those investments in a age appropriate allocation that most of the employers have is a perfect thing to be able to do. It's perfect. It's common sense. The other thing is, try to, as much as possible, and this is a huge problem, is, student loan debt. For those of us that are able to get the education to be able to move forward, we have to mortgage our futures with student loan debt. So,
well, no, Jim, you know what? I'm glad you brought that up, because the question I have for you is, that's another, myth that we were kind of so. I'm not saying that education isn't important. It's not that it isn't important, but what we've been sold is that educational debt is good debt, right? And so as a result, people in our communities haven't been discriminating about how we're getting this education, and are racking up huge thousands, tens, hundreds of $1,000s of debt. Mm-hmm. We see this in Wealthy You, and yet they're not getting a return on their investment. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on a strategy that parents and individuals themselves need to consider when they're making that choice, so that they don't mortgage their future.
Yeah, and again, and sometimes it's common sense. It's for those of us that can't afford to educate our children and to pay the don't feel like you're doing your child a service, or you're doing them a disservice if you can pay for it, but you think it's a good idea for them to take out debt to build character or to build, to have skin in the game. Take that one off the table.
Okay.
Number one. And then, students need to look at what's your best path. Is it a better idea to go to a community college? Like in Chicago, the city colleges and the community colleges in the area are outstanding for 2 years, right? Where even coming out of some public schools in the city of Chicago, you can go into city college for 2 years, and you can then transfer all of those credits to, University of Illinois at Chicago or DePaul University or something, a really well thought of accredited university. And then you've had the opportunity and you've saved almost 60% of the cost because you've been able to go to a lower price. And if you think about it, you're graduating with the exact same degree. The other thing that I think too is for a lot of African American students, and look at the HBCUs, the ability and the access that those universities give within corporations, within opportunities, is tremendous. I'm a trustee at Morehouse College. While I didn't go to a HBCU, I have come to find that, the majority of my mentors and colleagues and people that I've respected and looked up to, they were products of SBC.
That is interesting though, Jim, right? Because I'll be honest with you, as someone who is a first generation college graduate and the first in my family to attend college, there was within our community, I would say that there was this, you need to go to, a majority university. It has more weight. And yet what we're seeing is, I'm outside of DC, so Howard, Morgan State, if you were to look at the leaders in our communities, many of them did come from HBCUs, but unfortunately, how it had been characterized was that it was less than if you didn't go to a majority university.
Right. And Deborah, that's just not true. The excellence that we see, particularly the African American excellence that we see in this country, there's almost a through line at some point to a HBCU. And there you have it. I mean, so I guess what you're saying it in terms of mindset, that we need to be much more deliberate, right, and practical about how we invest in education, so that we're making, decisions that don't put our children and ourselves at a unique economic disadvantage, because we're not, to your point, able to afford to invest in that 401k, or think we can't anyway, because we do have all these other obligations. I have another question for you, particularly as you talked about the young folks not waiting to invest and then going into their 401ks. And what we've seen in a Wealthy You is that a lot of people are going into these target date funds, but that those funds aren't performing, even though they're allocated, to be based on age or that sort of thing. And so your point was, you said that we are passive investors. Jim, from your viewpoint, what do you think has to happen for African Americans to be able to increase their financial acumen so that they can be more
prudently aggressive, as you put it?
Well, Deborah, the thing is even though the thing is about your 401k and about your retirement is you set an allocation. You set an allocation, and usually when you're younger, what that allocation is, it's going to be more aggressive into equities. It's going to be more aggressive into the parts of the investable universe that can provide higher returns, but they have a higher standard deviation of return. So that means that you're going to see more volatility, or you're going to feel the pain. But here's the reality. I've been doing this since my career started in 1983. And I've seen the stock market crash of 87. I've seen the bond market debacle of the Fed, of mortgages in 93, 94. I've seen the liquidity issues in 1998. I saw the dot-com bust. I've now seen, the almost financial implosion with mortgages and the financial markets being in trouble in 2008. And we've just recently we came back from 2008, which was really the brink. And then this is our first real market turn down, and the market's been down 30%. It's a correction. And so what we have to do, and if you look at the most successful investors on the planet, they have discipline and they don't panic.
That's
right?
Exactly right, Jim. I do think that, however, and we kind of come out of the same world. And one of the things that became very clear to me, that's after Black Monday, was I saw I felt like I was in like a Twilight Zone. I saw middle class folks who I hail from Detroit. And so I'm at a Merrill Lynch office. All these people are, kind of like managers or factory workers were buying the company stock, Ford, Chrysler, GM. And as soon as the market goes down, they're sell, sell, sell. But what I saw was our wealthiest clients come in that evening and really be very deliberate about the investment choices that they were making, and they were picking up those companies that fell, not because there was anything in terms of intrinsic value change, but simply because of, fear. It sort of goes back to Warren Buffett's be greedy when others are fearful. And I certainly feel like that's the point that you're making, that over time, what we do know is, regardless of those ups and downs, that we're going to be much further ahead. And I want to go back to that other question when we come back, because we only have 30 seconds, is
okay.
What do we need to do then to help help Black, close the wealth gap? And part of that is help people get more comfortable with having their investments in stock, and also using investment managers. So that's what I want to tackle when we come back. And in our next section is perfect, because it's all about execution. So don't go anywhere, folks. We'll be right back.
Fanbase is pioneering a new era of social media for the creator economy. This next generation social media app with over 600,000 users is raising $17 million, and now is your chance to invest. For details on how to invest, visit startengine.com/fanbase or scan the QR code. Another way we're giving you the freedom to be you without limits.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, right here on Get Wealthy. We're talking about getting wealthy and really closing this wealth gap. And my conversation today is with Jim Casselberry. He is the CEO and co-founder of Known Holdings, a financial platform, which is also an asset manager. So let's welcome Jim Casselberry back. Jim, I want to talk a little bit about that because I really believe that part of the wealth gap is not just all of the things that you mentioned when you came on, access to capital, access, being limited in terms of our ability to manage those assets. But what do you feel like needs to happen for our community to own more equities, to have more of our investments and be aggressively prudent?
Well, I think the best thing that we can do is, we need to make sure that we educate ourselves. We need to make sure that we educate ourselves financially, that we educate our children financially about understanding a FICO score, about understanding a credit card, about understanding what investments are, understanding what your 401k is, understanding what your mortgage is, understanding if you don't own, what you're doing for rent, making sure that, or if you are disadvantaged, if you are in poverty, if you are on government assistance, understanding all of that and all of the opportunity or lack of opportunity that exists so that you can make the best decisions within whatever circumstance you are. You can make the optimal decision for where you are. That doesn't, if you're starting at the very bottom, if you're starting midway up the stairs, or if you're starting at the top of the stairs, the thing that you can do is for where you are. If you're on the floor or below the floor, you should work to be able to make the best decisions that are applicable to you. That's one thing to be able to do. And then once you have that plan, stick to it. Continue to exercise it, to be able to move forward with it. And try to, that's one of the reasons I talked about HBCUs, is HBCUs create a unique network of individuals that look like you. And if we look at our compatriots, if we look at our different ethnicities, they've utilized that camaraderie to be able to create community, investment, and opportunity.
And I think what you're saying, Jim, is you're talking about social capital. Yes. And that social capital, which to me is one of the most valuable assets of all, that in many cases we haven't learned how to leverage, I think is the point that you're making. Is that it's not just about having the degree or having the pedigree, but what is also important is that you're forming those relationships, and many of those relationships can open doors for you. And so my question to you also, Jim, is one of your Known Holdings focuses is also about scaling businesses. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the work. You made a statement very early on just about businesses having cash flow, right? But not necessarily having the ability to scale through which you can create generational wealth. So I would love to get your view on entrepreneurship and that also being a viable pathway to wealth.
Right. Deborah, again, this is, it's such a broad conversation that we can have. Let me try to
Yes.
condense it with a couple of things. You know,
Okay.
I had the opportunity of growing up in the Chicago area, and I knew George and Joan Johnson, who had Johnson Products. I knew the Gardners, who had Soft Sheen, Ultra Sheen products. I knew John and Eunice Johnson, who had Johnson Publishing. You know, the Johnson Publishing, there should have been no question. They should have been AOL. They should have been Time Warner. You know, Johnson Products should have been L'Oreal, right? But part of their entrepreneurs, they're doing this thing. But then when they sought to do what the other entrepreneurs like them that were majority were doing, they were selling their capital, being able to capture that value, and then being able to go and redeploy it. The pressure was on us to keep those companies, to continue it was a great service within the community. But the short-sightedness of some of those decisions was it limited the ability of growth. And if we then look at Bob Johnson, who was able to sell BET and create more wealth and create more, you know, Bob created probably a half dozen different entities out of that have created massive wealth for dozens and dozens of people. But so the whole thing.
So is that a function of access to capital, intellectual capital, or just the inability, because you are that first business, to have grown to that size of maybe not having that network who can counsel you on the viability of having that liquidity event, right? And then now you've got that capital to go and redeploy in something that could be even more long-term, create that intergenerational wealth.
Right. No, that's exactly it. And even in the example of my family business, you know, my uncle took the stock and my dad took the cash. Not that my dad did poorly, but my uncle's wealth was probably 8-10x of my dad's, because he took the stock and the stock continued to appreciate. Now, my dad took the cash, he invested it in, you know, in another business, and that business grew and it did fine for, you know, for me and my sisters and for our family. But it wasn't the same effect of what happened with my uncle. So again, that's two lessons there. It's the lessons of being able to redeploy your capital once you have been able to sell. And then it's also taking a greater risk. The less risk was to take the cash, right? That's what my dad did. But the greater risk was what my uncle did by taking the stock. So we have to be able to understand, and Deborah, one of the things you keep on alluding to, and I say myself, is one of the biggest differences of why I think that with what we're doing with Known and with what I'm trying to do with the network of folks that I'm working with is different, is we didn't exist 40 years ago. You know, there was nobody in the business that had 40 years of institutional investment management experience, who had been a consultant, who had been an allocator, who had worked at MacArthur Foundation, that had worked at JP Morgan Chase, that had worked at Aon Consulting. We didn't exist. And so the ability that we have, one, to have that experience, but two, to be able to, as you've alluded before, to be able to counsel business owners on what to do when they have these events, when they have these opportunities, because we've literally been able to be in the position of, through the wealthy families that I've worked with that have had IPOs, to be able to set up their generational platforms with foundations and their endowments and how they invest and how they're able to move forward and how they're able to move money back into different communities. That's something that just didn't exist and that we have now. And so that was one of the biggest reasons of why I felt that it was imperative that we start known, because we have to build this infrastructure for the BIPOC community.
Well, you know what? It's interesting, Jim, because just in that conversation, in that response, I really understand the name of your business now, Known, right? I get it. It's like the point is the secrets of the 1%, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's a very closed arena, and certainly I spent a great deal of my time in that world. But you even went deeper, right, into what is unknown, mm-hmm. And so now I totally get the reason for your name. And when we come back, it's our lightning round. And I really would like for you to share with our viewers, just as you see it from your purview, of how the unique approach you're taking in closing the wealth gap. So when we come back, it's our Analyze, Optimize, and Maximize round, where we're going to hear more from Jim Casselberry and now how Known Holdings is attacking the whole wealth gap from all different types of dimensions. So when we come back, it's all about Analyze, Optimize, and Maximize.
Fanbase is pioneering a new era of social media for the creator economy. This next generation social media app with over 600,000 users is raising $17 million, and now is your chance to invest. For details on how to invest, visit startengine.com/fanbase or scan the QR code. Another way we're giving you the freedom to be you without limits.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you've been enjoying this conversation on Get Wealthy, really giving you some insight into the wealth gap, but more importantly, how it exists. And now we're going to talk with Jim Casselberry about how his company, Known Holding, is attacking this problem from all areas. So, Jim, what I'm fascinated about is your approach. And in researching you and your company, what became clear is a couple of things that I'd really like for you to define. You talk about the new majority, mm-hmm. and Blacks and people of color. Talk to us a little bit about why that's important.
Well, Deborah, people who look like you and me are almost 70% of the world's population. Of the investable universe that's out there, everybody says it's less than 2% that we control. Well, it's less than that, and it's almost not even statistically significant to the size of it. So if we're going to, if we see what's happening in our world today, if we see with the widening wealth gap, we see with what's happening with climate, when we see what's happening with the violence in our cities, when we see all of that, that's because the improper allocations of resources that exclude 70% of the world's population. And so what we have to do is we have to redirect, we have to make better decisions in those allocations. And so one of the ways that we think that you're able to do that is by my experience of working with asset holders. And I'm talking about wealthy families. I'm talking about billionaires. I'm talking about foundations and endowments. I'm not really talking about public pension plans, and I'm not really talking about corporations. I'm talking about the wealth holders that literally have their generational wealth based on the growth of the U.S. economy over the last 200 or 300 years. And the basis or the foundation of that economy was based on free labor from Africans that were brought to this country by the indigenous population that almost went through a genocide here, and and then even Asians coming in for their engineering ability for the Transcontinental Railroad.
Yes.
So that transfer of wealth is what can be used because those generations, these younger generations, the generational shift, they care about outcomes. They see that their environment isn't healthy. They are seeing the violence in their inner cities. They're seeing the inequities of it, and they care about the outcomes. Not all of them, but enough of them do that and if they want a solution of how to do that, that's what No One is here to do. And we're here to do it because we've done it. We've done investments. So the team that we've put together has done investments. They've done investment banking. They've done asset allocation. We've done this over 40, 30, 20 years, and we know how to do it. I've invested portfolios. I've done probably in my career over $80 billion in investments. And in the last few years, I've invested a portfolio of approximately $1 billion that had a 55% IRR. And it was all basically invested in Black and brown. So for all of this that people say that there's not a pipeline or there aren't opportunities, what there isn't organizations or financial services companies that are built for Black and brown, that are built for us.
Well, I don't argue that, but Jim, as someone who is pragmatic and understands wealth, right? The fact is that wealthy 1% got that way exactly as you described. And, it's fascinating. I was just reading an article about someone requesting I don't know if it was FOIA, if it was a journalist, but the fact that New York Life, a lot of the financial institutions, right, earned a lot of money through the slave trade. And so my question to you is just about flow. What is the incentive of those having the capital, right, investing, and in spite of the fact that you have a great track record, what is the conversation that you have about your ability to not only provide a return, but also do well and doing good at the same time?
Well, Deborah, one, it's because I've done it.
Okay.
But two, what I've seen within this, there's going to be, it's rumored to be between 61 trillion and 91 trillion dollars that's going to transfer from the greatest generation to baby boomers to Gen X to millennials to Gen Z. And my experience has been over the last 7 years in running a single family office for a billionaire family there are asset holders that care about, that want to narrow the gaps between racial, social, and economic inequality. What they don't know how to do is how to do it.
Okay.
And that's what we do. And we are able to do it. When I was at the MacArthur Foundation, we did a transaction in South Carolina at a small organization, South Carolina Jobs and Economic Development Authority. They were using HUD block grants as part of the loan packages for businesses within the state to create jobs. We bought that portfolio because it was underfunding and the block grants were going to go away. We repackaged them, we reserviced them, and allowed them more money to go and make investments. What that led to over 17 years was it led to the creation of 250,000 jobs. It led to to underwriting $9 billion in loans and businesses and capital to businesses in South Carolina that attracted the auto companies to come to South Carolina. My partner, Val Redhorse, has numerous stories of the investments that she's been able to make in tribal lands and on reservations that have, changed the financial trajectory of those communities. The work that I did at MacArthur, the work that I did with Aon in helping large pension fund holders make better investments in Black and brown and minority companies without the detrimental rules or guidelines that sometimes exist that disrupt the opportunity, we've been able to be successful. So it's not a question of if this can be done. We do it, and we can do it, and we can do it confidently. But as you have alluded to, we're going upstream, because
yes.
people have been indoctrinated with what in the movie Wall Street and Michael Douglas's character Gordon Gekko of coming out that greed is good.
Greed is good, yes.
Right? Well, it's not. It's not good to be extracted. It's not good to continue this building of a wealth gap. It's not good if we continue on this path that the average wealth of a Black family is going to go to zero. That's what the current trend is.
That's right.
Right, and we have to. I don't want to get too controversial, but one of the things I believe is that the gun violence that we're seeing in our city it's an economic problem. It's an economic problem.
Absolutely. Poverty is violence. I mean, that's a fact, right? So you're creating, but I think what else is happening? I think so often we think about violence in the inner city, but now what we're seeing is it's not just the inner city, it's happening everywhere. It's happening in rural communities. It's happening in affluent bedrooms communities. It's happening everywhere. And that is a function of our societal issues.
It is. And Deborah, one of the things that if we look to the thing that I don't think a lot of people took away from January 6th that I did, you have white guys who storm their own Capitol. There's a problem because they're feeling as if they're disenfranchised and they're feeling like they have problems. That means that our economy needs to do something different. We need to do that.
That's good, Jim. And we're going to wrap right there. Man, an interesting conversation. Hey, let's keep us apprised of what you're doing. Let's keep this conversation going. I think that the work you're doing is critical. And I really want to thank you for coming on Get Wealthy and having this conversation with me today.
Well, thank you, Deborah. We appreciate the opportunity. We appreciate to talk about it. And as me and my partners always say, this is more than us just trying to do something that's going to create wealth. We feel that it's our call and our mission. And we're going to work to try to make it better.
All right. I love it. It's the mission. and not the money. All right, that's Jim Casselberry. When we come back, the 3 takeaways from today's show. Don't go anywhere, folks. We'll be right back.
Fanbase is pioneering a new era of social media for the creator economy. This next generation social media app with over 600,000 users is raising $17 million, and now is your chance to invest. For details on how to invest, visit startengine.com/fanbase or scan the QR code. Another way we're giving you the freedom to be you without limits.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it.
This is about covering us.
Invest in black-owned media.
Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks.
We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible.
Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is roland@rolandsmartin.com.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Deborah Owens, host of Get Wealthy, only on Black Star Network. And here are your 3 takeaways from today. Number 1 is that you cannot save your way to wealth. You must invest. And as Jim Casselberry said, be prudently aggressive and learn what you need to do in order to have your money grow. And then finally, social capital is the most valuable asset. That's going to do it for me on this episode of Get Wealthy, only on Black Star Network.